Welcome to the education series from the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium, where we bring the River Museum to you. Dive in with us to learn about coral conservation, the Pacific Octopus, and meet the animals in the tidepool touch tank with Bailey and Maya.
Welcome to the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium in Dubuque, Iowa. My name is Bailey, and my title here at the River Museum is Outreach and Camp Lead. Today we are going to talk about coral reefs. Coral reefs are underwater ecosystems made up of individualized corals known as polyps. Corals are marine invertebrate animals that have hard exoskeletons made up of calcium carbonate. Coral reefs are nicknamed the rainforest of the sea, and one reason they might be named that is because they are a keystone species. A keystone species is an organism that holds together an environment or an ecosystem, and without it, the rest of that ecosystem will fail. Coral reefs are important for a few different reasons. The first reason is because they are food and habitat to approximately 25% of the world's fish. With that, they are home to over 4,000 different species of fish, 700 different species of coral, and thousands of different other animals and plant life, such as seahorses and algae. The reason that corals are important is because a lot of them, especially down in the Atlantic Ocean, are what we call barrier reefs. A barrier reef is any sort of coral reef, such as the Florida Reef Tract, that surrounds an island or a stretch of land. What it does is it breaks down all of the waves that might crash into the shorelines from tropical storms or even just crashing onto the shorelines in general. Unfortunately, coral reefs are experiencing a disease called the stony coral tissue loss disease. What this disease does is it will kind of create these little white spots on the corals, and over time those white spots are going to continue growing. As they grow, those white spots are going to peel off the tissue of the coral, and eventually the coral will have a 100% death rate. Coral reef down in Florida is actually facing the stony coral tissue loss disease. 55% of this coral reef is actually infected by this stony coral tissue loss disease. There are conservation efforts that are helping the Florida Reef Tract down in Florida with this stony coral tissue loss disease, and that is actually called the Florida Reef Tract Rescue Project. Here at the River Museum, we were actually the very first institution outside of Florida to help with this conservation effort. So what happened was we received 33 different species of coral, and our job is to house these corals and provide food and a living experience for these corals, and eventually release back into the Florida Reef Tract to hopefully expand and grow the barrier reef down in Florida. Here at the River Museum, you might see algae growing on our corals in the Rivers to the Sea Center. This is because the algae and the coral create a mutualistic relationship. The algae provides food for the corals, and the coral is actually a way for the algae to stay protected from waves in the ocean. A few things that you can do to help protect the coral reef down in Florida and corals around the world is to make sure that you are using reef-safe sunscreen. Another way that you might be able to help coral reefs is if you go scuba diving or snorkeling, to make sure that you are washing your snorkeling suit or scuba diving suit or even your swimsuit after every ocean visit. So if you're going from one part of the ocean to another part on the other side of Florida, making sure that you wash that swimsuit so that you aren't transferring any diseases or any sort of chemicals into the ocean that might not be found in that body of water. The third reason that you can help coral reefs is by not touching them. When you touch those animals and corals, you can actually pass along diseases or other germs that you might have on your body that they haven't been introduced to, which can also cause diseases in those corals and make them. You can learn more about coral reefs by visiting us or going onto our website, rivermuseum.com.
Hi, my name is Maia Davidson. I am the Curator of Marine Life and Animal Ambassadors for the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium. And today we are going to be feeding our octopus. Every evening we pull out food from our freezer, let it thaw overnight, and then we weigh out and prepare the food for all of our animals. So come with me into the refrigerator. Every day we pull a food bin about this size out. Depending on the animal, I have a variety of foods in here. The octopus actually prefers shrimp, so I'm going to be feeding her a lot of shrimp today. And we will also cut up some salmon as well. We do weigh out our food for all of our animals, so I have the scale here. And just like people food, when it's frozen, it does lose some of its nutritional content. So we have a liquid vitamin that we're going to supplement as well. Put this to our octopus. And because octopus are very smart, we do something very cool with her. We'll oftentimes use different forms of enrichment. So we'll put food in here and then offer it to her. She'll have to pull the food out. Or you can do something like this, where she'll actually have to put it in here to pull the food out. I'm going to fill this with water so she doesn't open up a big air bubble. And then put the food that we prepared for her earlier inside. Close it up.
Today we are going to talk about tide pools. The animals that live in tide pools are important for our ecosystem because they provide food for other bigger animals, and they also eat things like the zooplankton and phytoplankton that you can also find in the tide pools. Ocean warming is the warming of the ocean due to fossil fuels such as coal and oil burning in the environment. This results with higher carbon dioxide levels in the air, which creates lower oxygen levels in the water, that a lot of animals that live in these tide pools live in colder environments. So they actually cannot survive in the warmer waters that are being created with that ocean warming. I have the tide pool touch tank here to provide an educational purpose to allow people to learn and get up close and personal with some of the animals that you might find in tide pools and learn a little bit more about that ocean warming while you are having those touching experiences. When you come up to the tide pool touch tank, the very first thing that you are going to do is actually wash your hands at either of our two sinks. We have one on both sides. Once your hands are washed, when you come up to the touch tank, we use 1 or 2 fingers to touch every single one of the animals that we have in here. And although you can touch the animals that we have here in our tide pool touch tank, if you do visit a ocean such as down in Florida and you find some tide pools with anemones or starfish in them, we do encourage you guys and ask you not to touch those animals because they are wild animals rather than animals that are used to being touched in an aquarium setting. Animals that you can find in tide pools are things such as anemones, starfish, urchins, and even our sea cucumbers. We have a few of those animals today that at the River Museum you are able to touch in our tide pool touch tank. We have the green sea anemones, bat stars, ochre stars, and leather starfish, and we also have the sea cucumbers today. The first animal that we have here in our tide pool is the giant red sea cucumbers. Giant red sea cucumbers can grow to be about 2 feet long and weigh about 2 pounds. They have 20 tentacles around their mouth, which actually helps them bring in the food to their mouth. And they have tubular-like feet, very similar to a starfish's feet, except the giant sea cucumber actually just kind of twirls through the water and moves through the water that way, rather than using their feet to move through the water. So they don't actually cling on to rocks or sandy bottoms like a sea star would. The 3 species of sea stars that we have in our tide pool, the bat stars, the ochre stars, and the leatherback starfish, all have eyes on the ends of their legs. So most of the starfish we have here in the tide pool have 5 legs, which means that they will have 5 eyes associated to those legs. I think there are a few in here that do have 6 legs, which again means that they're going to have 6 eyes at the very end of those legs. Just like the sea cucumbers, they do have those tubular feet that they will use to cling onto rocks, sandy bottoms, other animals, anything that you can find in those tide pools, and they will also use them to swim around and move. They also have a thing called a madreporite, which is the orange or white thing on the top of the sea star that actually helps bring in and push water through the rest of their body, which allows them and helps them to move through that water. So they aren't just kind of picking up their feet like we do to move, they are using the currents of the water to help them move through that water. The next animal that we have in the tide pool touch tank are the green sea anemones. The green sea anemones, when you go to touch them, they actually have a sticky feeling to them. And that sticky feeling is actually a poison that doesn't go past our epidermis layer, which is the top layer of our skin, but it can affect other fish in the ocean that don't live within them. And what it does is it basically kind of paralyzes that fish so that they can eat them. Another thing about the green sea anemone is they have one hole for both to eat and also to go to the bathroom in. Green sea anemones also respond to touch. So when you go to touch them, they will kind of feel like they are hugging you back. That is also a way that they can tell whether a fish that is swimming through them is food or a friend that lives inside of them. If it is a food, what they will do is they will actually bring that food closer. They'll kind of attach to it and they'll bring it closer to that mouth. And then they will eventually close up as they are eating and processing that food. One fish that you might find a lot that lives in the green sea anemones is actually the clownfish, also known as the Nemo fish. The Nemo fish lives inside of them, so it isn't actually affected by that poison that it can secrete and creates. And the anemone knows not to eat the clown. The clownfish and the green sea anemone living together, they actually create a symbiotic relationship. So the green sea anemone is going to provide protection for that clownfish to live and protect it from other bigger fish that might try to eat it. And the green sea anemone is basically going to get cleaned up from that clownfish as it eats all of the algae and other things that might try to grow on the green sea anemone. Next visit to the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium. We do hope that you guys are able to explore the rivers to the sea and come in and interact with some of the animals here at the Tide Pool Touch Tank. Again, thank you guys for coming, and we hope that you learned a lot about tide pools.